Well, welcome to Azucar TV. My name is Doctora Natalie Munoz, and I am here with one of my sister scholars, Doctora Sandy Placido. Doctora Sandy, can you please talk to us a little bit about yourself, about your journey, and the kind of research that you're doing right now?
Okay, so I am a proud Dominicana with Afro-Indigenous roots from the Bronx, born and raised. My parents migrated there, and my journey is that after college, I went to predominantly white institutions for high school and college, but after college, I immersed myself en el pueblo, me di un baño de pueblo, and I became a community organizer in Washington Heights for 2 years. This was back in 2008, the very end of the Bush years, transitioning to the Obama years, when deportations were ransacking the Dominican community, especially in New York City, where we have such a high concentration. And so I was working at an immigrant rights organization, Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigrant Rights, working with individuals facing deportation from the United States, specifically because they had a criminal record. So I was always very interested in that intersection of immigration and criminalization. And so that actually brings me to my work, because the first time I went to the Schomburg archive was actually looking for historical inspiration that I could bring to the community organizing space. I was looking for examples basically of Black and Latinx solidarity in the 60s, because I wanted to tell the members of the group, like, look, folks have done this before. Because at the time I was trying to make connections between the mass incarceration of Black and Latinx people today. And I was like, okay, historical and antecedent. And then I went to Malcolm X's papers, and what I actually found was the letter written by the woman that I'm now writing my book on. And I found a letter by a woman named Livia Cordero that she had written to Malcolm X in 1964, but from Ghana. So immediately I have all of these questions. But then when I actually read the letter, it's precisely what I was looking for. She writes, "Dear Malcolm, here's my 5 point plan for how we need to unite the Afro American and the Puerto Rican community in the US. Our struggles are intertwined. Colonialism and racism are two sides of the same coin. This is what we need to do. Here's some people for you to contact." Malcolm X was killed about 5 or 6 months later. But that led me on the journey of finding out, who is this woman? Who is Ana Livia Cordero? Who was this fierce Puerto Rican writing to Malcolm? And why was she living in Ghana in the 60s? And that's a little bit about kind of what brought me to the work. And I think I did bring the letter into the space, but then later that year when I started graduate school is when I started the research journey on who Cordero was.
Wow, that is so dope and powerful. Can you talk to me a little bit about what about her story has really shaped you? Because I feel like historical work has a healing perspective to it, right? And so I'm curious on your own journey of like womanhood, but also motherhood, like what aspects of her story have impacted you on a deeper or a more spiritual way?
Yes, I have to say, I sometimes think that Cordero found me. I'm already crying. I kind of feel that she found me, that she found me from the afterlife and was like, I am going to mentor Sandy because I've learned so much from her. I feel that my political consciousness has been shaped and raised by her. She was a Puerto Rican revolutionary. She used the Marxist method. She probably wouldn't have called herself a Marxist or a communist, though she was friendly with all of those circles and theories and knew them well. I think she was more interested in the kind of day to day practice of understanding reality. She became a physician. She graduated from Columbia Medical School in 1953 at the age of like 21. So she was this incredible, I think she became a mentor and role model to me through the archive. And she passed in 92, and even through time and space, because at the time, as a graduate student at Harvard, another predominantly white institution where I felt so isolated and alone as an Afro Latina Dominican researcher with mentoring that was good but not sufficient. I feel that a lot of times when I was alone going through the archive, and just seeing that there was this other professional, incredible, pioneering, path-breaking woman who also had these very strong political commitments, who was unabashedly a revolutionary fighting for Puerto Rican liberation, who was always trying to build these links between Black and Latinx communities, writing essays about why do people in Latin America and the Caribbean need to care about Black power, living in Ghana in the 60s because President Nkrumah actually hired her to work at the first medical school that he established, right? Remember, Nkrumah is the first president of Ghana after it gains its independence in 1957. He welcomed the diaspora. She was part of that diaspora who came back to work in the first medical school that he founded after, getting liberation from Britain, to work at something called the National Institute for Health and Medical Research. So she's kind of this holistic, incredible woman who's doing public health research, medical work with women and children, but also representing the Puerto Rican independence movement, making links with the Afro-Asian Conference, the Non-Aligned Movement, the Tricontinental Conference, literally at the intersection of all of these decolonial struggles that were happening worldwide at the 60s. But as a Latina woman, I identify a lot with that because I also, in my past and present, I've been very involved in different social movements that are leftist and that are also seeking this goal of liberation, which is a complex thing. We don't all have to have the exact same political line, but I think deep down, people who are looking for self-determination, liberation, however you call it, independence, revolution, but trying to basically, what I see it as, decolonization, trying in our Caribbean, right, where we've been taken over for so long by these imperialist powers, how do we regain power and control over our lives? And I think she's just like an incredible model, in terms of her ideology as a theorist, but also practically. She was just like an incredible grassroots organizer. And that's what I also love about her, that she was not afraid to work with the people and just be at their level, even though she had all of these degrees. So
That's
I
great.
like to say that, yeah.
I want to shift into the motherhood aspect because I think I love what you said in terms of like we all have this shared goal
Mhm.
of liberation, right? But a lot of times people don't consider motherhood
Mhm.
as a form of rebellion or as a form of liberation or resistance. So I'm curious, one of the things that I admire about you is this transition that you've had into motherhood. And so I'm curious in terms of your own research and how that's also shaped your motherhood and helped you to reflect on what motherhood looks like for you as an Afro Latina.
Beautiful question. Thank you so much for asking it. Absolutely. My life is completely different now. I have an 11-month-old son named Jaciel. Hey, Jaciel. I hope you watch this when you're older. I love him. Like he's the center of my world.
Right.
I understand. I feel like I'm seeing the world so differently. It makes me look at all of these individuals that I study historically so differently. Ana Livia had two sons. In my dissertation, now book manuscript, I mention it. Oh, one was born in April, another was born in Ghana. Like, it's like about a paragraph. Now, after having my son and realizing that she was doing all of this global solidarity building, intellectual work, and grassroots organizing while raising two children, while working as a doctor, as a public health practitioner, with a husband that unfortunately, although he was radical, at the time patriarchy was real, it's still real. Honestly, a lot of that labor went to her when they eventually divorced. She's the one who stayed with the kids. It has made me see her so differently later when she returned to Puerto Rico and she started her community organizing efforts. She made her community organizing intergenerational. There were always kids around. People had their kids. She, like, sometimes people would migrate from Puerto Rico to the US and she would stay and take care of the kids of people who, and I read about other figures, people such as Evangelina Rodriguez, who was the first woman to become a doctor in the Dominican Republic. She was a Black Dominican woman who focused on women and children, especially during the US occupation of DR in the early 20th century. And again, I've written about her doing this work with rural, poor Black women and children, but it hits so different when you actually have a child. I guess what I'm getting at, what has been most humbling is the amount, not just of labor, time, energy, but the incredibly specialized skill set that it requires to keep a baby alive. Like I have had to completely, my PhD has no, like I've had to submit to the knowledge of the grandmas and the aunties, my sisters. None of these people in my life have PhDs. And then I have no idea what I'm doing. I just think of the first few months where I had no idea what I was doing. And then it makes me think back on all of the ancestors in our community, the caretakers. Like we literally would not have been here, me and you and everyone else in our community doing beautiful things if it wasn't for a long line of caretakers that were uncompensated, unpaid, devalued. It's a crazy because it's one of the most important, I think, lines of work, and that it I mean, there's, the amount of inequality, right? Because right now I'm struggling to find a daycare. It's so expensive. Um and it's just one of these areas that you literally cannot do the work you need to do unless you have someone trusted and knowledgeable to raise the next generation. So it's absolutely revolutionary. And I take solace in knowing about the histories of, for example, I teach Latinx history. People like the Young Lords, one of the first things after they started the Women's Caucus, people like Iris Morales and other groups in New York in the 60s and 70s that they did was start daycares. They understood that, and even within a revolutionary space, you need to have childcare. And so I know it's been done before, and I would love to see our generation take childcare more seriously, so that we can kind of really create truly intergenerational spaces.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, in terms of once your book is released, right? What is the change that you hope to see from your work and from your labor of love?
Oh, that's such a great question. Sometimes folks ask me, I'm Dominican, I'm writing about this Puerto Rican woman. Oh, how did you come to write about? Not that, that shouldn't even be a question, because as kind of Caribbean people, we are so united. Historically, you see many examples of our islands
Right.
always
But
being
there's always like this like
the
stereotypical like
that we're
Boricuas
divine.
versus
No.
Dominicans,
And it's like history,
Gonzong versus
like
Pegao.
right, like, and it's crazy because when you go into the historical
Right.
archive, like, all you see is people going between the islands, right?
Mm.
Always building solid. People move looking for jobs, start families, intermarry. I mean, all of our great revolutionary leaders were exiled to Puerto Rico. A
Right.
lot of the
We're
Puerto Rican
so
revolutionary leaders
transnational.
that I
Yes.
write about were
Um,
exiled in DR. Like,
yes.
Bush was in PR. Like, all of these,
Yes.
like,
Our history is connected.
we have always been in solidarity. It's completely false, right? That we have actually materially been in solidarity with each other at the most crucial times, always, for the last 500 years. My hope is, the first is that by bringing the story of Ana Livia Cordero, absolutely, though, I am very interested in supporting the struggles in Puerto Rico right now. I have great admiration for the Puerto Rican liberation struggle of today. The young people and people of all ages that I've met in Puerto Rico are incredibly creative with their activism after, they're still a colony of the United States, and the amount of creativity that it has taken them for the last 126 years, right under the boot of one of the strongest global superpower, like, a lot to be respected. But I do hope that beyond Puerto Rico, that Ana Livia can be an inspiration also to all Caribbean revolutionaries, to Latinx revolutionaries, to any person of color, any person who's marginalized because of their gender, anyone who is trying to balance, again, having these professional roles, but also these revolutionary politics, people who are struggling with, like, but how can I make change from within? But, and not be co opted. Like, this woman really offers. My book is called A Decolonial Science, Dr. Ana Livia Cordero and the Puerto Rican Liberation Struggle. And decolonial science is because I really see her sort of roadmap. Like, she really broke things down. She did something called the scientific method for organizing. Again, she was a doctor, so she had this scientific mind, but this political mind. She really was like, let's take things one day at a time. Our organizing is an experiment. That's the type of language they would use. Let's start by understanding the reality. From there, let's work with the community to create the agenda. It was never top down. It was always consensus based. It was always like, let's hear from the most, what they call the lumpen proletariat, right? Like, the most marginalized, the Black Afro Puerto Ricans. Like, those were the people she centered. That's kind of also why she was erased, right? A lot of people are like, well, how come I never heard about her? This woman was ostracized, like, as a proud woman who was pro Black, like, who was pro the people. She was completely marginalized by the middle class white elite patriarchal independence movement in Puerto Rico. She was slandered as an the anti-communism of the time. That crazy communist woman over there who's wearing kente cloth, like, so this is why she was erased. Like, she was kind of very beyond her time. But I hope that she can offer lessons in terms of her organizing and ideas about how we can actually do the work day to day. to liberate ourselves at the psychological level, at the material level.
Wow,
Yes. Yeah.
We both came in through a Latinx cluster hire as faculty, and I'm just so grateful to have you as a colleague and as a sister scholar. So, if you could just share with some of the students that are watching today from Rutgers, what are some of the courses that you're teaching so that they can connect with you if they'd like on campus?
Yeah, it's a huge just honor to be your colleague. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, for this show, for you. And I love that Rutgers Newark was like, this is important and made it a priority. Absolutely. I would say 90% of my students are Latinx. Like, hey, FYI, Latinx people go to college. Find any sociologist who can give you the numbers. If your university does not have Latinx professors, you're doing something wrong. So, number one, I love that I have this opportunity where I can make a living, because that's not always the case because of the precarity of academia and how elitist it is, and how much, we have so many individuals are in our community with the PhD, but then they don't get the job. So where's that disconnect? But I do feel very happy to be in this position. And the class that I'm teaching now, for example, is an introduction to Latinx history. But we actually start with the Taino. And so I have my students thinking the whole time, why are we talking about Tainos? Why are we talking about Haiti? Why are we talking about the history of Spain when it was conquered by the Moors? Why are we talking about the history of the Portuguese in West Africa? Why are we talking about Equatorial Guinea and Brazil and Belize and all these places that sometimes get left out of Latinidad? So very much my class is about remapping Latinidad, changing the timeline, changing the geography. And in the future at Rutgers Newark, my hope is to teach classes I've taught in the past, classes such as Caribbean women's history. I've taught also just basic US history surveys. I like to teach US history because I like to teach US history in a way that actually centers folks of color. A lot of times when you just teach the like US history post 45, it can be very whitewashed. When I teach it, and my students get a little, because I'm teaching it a very different way. It's almost like they're taking an ethnic studies, Black studies class, but that is the history of the US. That doesn't always get told that way. And I teach also, I'm hoping to maybe develop new classes on the history of Latinx people in New Jersey. I think that is like very understudied. There's not enough books about the role of Latinx people in places outside of like New York, Texas, LA. So I hope to do that.
Excited for our students and for the fact that we get to take up space here in academia together. And so I just want to thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your story and for all the work and liberation work that you're doing, not only as a scholar, but as a mother and sharing with the community. So thank you again, Doctora.
Thank you so much for this space. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you.